Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another ShareWise webinar. My name is Harry McCaskill. I'm looking forward to today's webinar. It's very, very exciting to have Nick here, the Managing Director at Sparc Technologies, SPN, to present a few key topics about what's been going on behind the scenes with their business. I know he's pretty excited to answer a few of your questions, but again, I'd like to thank Nick for his time coming on here. I know he's a busy man to give us a bit of insight and, like I said, answer any questions. So I'll send it over to Nick, but it'll be a little bit of a presentation followed by Q&A. But if you've got any questions that you want answered, throughout the prezo, I'll sort of jump in at times and ask him a few questions. So put them in the comments, in the chat, and it should be good. But Nick, pleasure to have you, and take it away.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Harry, and thanks for everyone joining the call. I'll just get my presentation up on screen here.
Excellent.
Hopefully you can see that.
Yep, all good. We've got it.
Okay, great. So yes, I'm here as the Managing Director of Sparc Technologies, and I've been Managing Director of the company for a bit over 6 months now. I've been with the company for 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was in the investment banking industry, primarily looking after resources clients, both in Australia and the UK. And with my work in banking, started to get more and more exposure to renewables for the mining sector, and ended up having moved back from the UK, doing some work in that space for Rio Tinto and others. And an opportunity came across my desk at that point in time, which was through a contact at Sparc, who were getting involved in a novel green hydrogen technology. And that now forms what we call the Sparc Hydrogen joint venture. So I joined the company when that JV was formed at the start of 2022, and looked after that on behalf of Sparc, with our partners Fortescue and the University of Adelaide, for about 2 years. And then, as I said, stepped up to Managing Director and now look after the whole technology portfolio as of January this year. So from a corporate perspective, it's all laid out here on the screen. Market cap about 20 million, don't have any large shareholders, the largest being the University of Adelaide, and their shareholding was through vending in IP at the time of the foundation of the company. So we are a technology company, and we operate in 2 key sectors or areas. Our most mature and longest standing technology area is in graphene materials. And some people on the call may be familiar with what graphene is, and I'll come to that later in the presentation. But we've been working in that space for about 5 years now. We feel like we're really well positioned in that sector, and we have products approaching commercialisation there, particularly targeted towards the coatings industry. So we have a fully functioning paint lab in Adelaide, in Kent Town, where we're based, and do pretty much all of our work in graphene materials in-house, albeit some of the tech originally came out of the University of Adelaide. And then through that relationship with U of A, we actually got access to what is now the Sparc Hydrogen project. And that was through them coming to us, around questions on coatings. And as it turned out, there was an opportunity to not only help on those issues that they were having, but also get involved with the project through an equity stake. And as it turned out, Fortescue had been looking at the same project for some time, and Sparc effectively formed up the JV, and Fortescue came in on the back of that deal that we did with the university. And that was about 2.5 years ago, as I mentioned earlier. Right. So we cover those 2 key sectors, and I'll focus separately on each throughout this presentation. To start with on Sparc Hydrogen. So one thing I like to point out to, I guess, generalist investors is that there's already a massive requirement for green hydrogen. It's not the fact that you need to put hydrogen in cars or in ships or in planes to have a market. It's already a 95 million tonne per annum market, which is about 4 times the copper market, to put that in perspective. And that hydrogen is produced predominantly via fossil fuel feedstocks, and it's a highly emitting industry. So it emits about 2.5% of global emissions, which is on par with the aviation industry. So in of itself, hydrogen, as we stand today, is a major hard to abate industry. And if you can produce green hydrogen at scale, then you'll have no issues in finding a market for your product, because there is a real push to decarbonize these hard to abate industries, including hydrogen. And that hydrogen, which is being produced today, is being used as a feedstock for ammonia, along with other chemical processes and refining processes. So on top of that, which is a significant opportunity as we stand today, there's obviously a big push towards utilizing green hydrogen in other hard to abate industries like steelmaking, chemicals, cement, and others. And what we're seeing at the moment in the market is a bit of a chicken and the egg situation where you have interest from these industries in decarbonising and using green hydrogen, but the costs of the industry of producing the green hydrogen are not at a level where it is attractive for those off-takers. Getting those costs down requires scaling the industry for green hydrogen production, but you can't do that without having the off-takers sort of taking the plunge at the front. So that therein is that chicken and egg problem.
Yeah, and just to jump in there, Nick, obviously, the green hydrogen space, it's been in the media and in the news recently for some not some of the greatest reasons, a couple of wrong reasons especially. But what's the difference about Sparc and your hydrogen approach?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Harry, and we're certainly keen to get the message out there that we're not doing conventional green hydrogen, which is really electrolysis. So just to step through that, pretty much 100% of the green hydrogen projects you'll hear about are all using a technology called electrolysis. It's actually a very old world process. It's been around for about 100 years. And put simply, you're pumping electricity into a body of water and you're splitting the H2O molecule into hydrogen and oxygen. Now, people do this in chemistry, year 11 chemistry experiments. So there's nothing particularly special about it.
Yeah.
To be called green hydrogen, you need to be doing that with green electricity. So that's solar PV, wind, and batteries to be classified as green hydrogen. Now, the key issues with that industry and why we're seeing the publicity around Fortescue and others pulling back is that the cost of producing green hydrogen in this way is really driven by the cost of that power. So the renewable electricity that I mentioned. Now, solar PV, wind, they're all mature industries now, and getting the cost down is not straightforward. And we're seeing that in our own power prices. They're not going down, they're going up, if anything. So this affects the costs by which you can produce green hydrogen. And as I said before, those costs are well and truly above what off-takers will stomach in terms of replacing their existing either hydrogen processes or in some of those hard to abate industries where we're looking to use hydrogen to decarbonize.
Right.
So what we're looking to do, and maybe I'll just skip forward to this slide, is a different process called photocatalysis. So electrolysis versus photocatalysis. Photocatalysis does not use electricity to split water. It uses the action of a photocatalyst material, and I'll show you a video of that over the slide. So basically, this process requires solar energy, a photocatalyst material, and water to produce hydrogen. And it's green hydrogen because the only energy input is sunlight and the only feedstock is water. So there's no other fossil inputs or other electricity requirements, anything like that. So it's a very simple process, and that drives the potential for very low costs. So that was why I was interested in joining the company. And that's why I think there's a huge potential for what Sparc Hydrogen is doing, alongside obviously an industry leader in Fortescue, and then the University of Adelaide, where the technology was founded and where currently, all of the R&D still takes place on behalf of Sparc Hydrogen.
Excellent.
And just to elaborate on that a little bit, and I'll come to it on the subsequent slides, but one of the differences, or one of the things we're doing differently within photocatalysis, which in itself is a nascent industry, is that we're utilizing infrastructure from the concentrated solar industry. We're effectively concentrating sunlight onto these photocatalyst materials, and that has a number of benefits, which I'll come to over the page. And then obviously we're emissions-free, it's an emissions-free technology. It's using water and sunlight to produce green hydrogen. I might step back just to, I guess, reiterate why we think photocatalysis has a real play vis-a-vis the incumbent technology, which is electrolysis. And if I put cost aside for one moment, we can also talk about some of the other issues these projects are having, and they come to the infrastructure requirements. So transmission lines, there's a huge amount of publicity and, for good reason, social license issues around building new transmission lines across a country like Australia, but that's replicated in other countries around the world. So they're very difficult to actually permit and then build, really long lead time infrastructure. And we need more transmission lines just to decarbonize our grid before we think about multi-gigawatt scale green hydrogen projects. So in my mind, the grid decarbonisation is the number one priority. And then, then you're looking at utilising the excess transmission infrastructure for green hydrogen projects. But that adds a really long lead time to producing or utilising large volumes of renewable electricity for any project. Then we've got the key infrastructure for a green hydrogen electrolysis project, which is the solar, PV, wind, and batteries, and then importantly, the electrolyzers. Now, the electrolyzers are, as I said, in some ways old world equipment, but they've never been scaled to the extent that the industry is now talking about or requiring in terms of producing green hydrogen at scale. So that's actually posing a lot of difficulties from a technical standpoint. And also there are compatibility issues with using electrolyzers paired with variable renewable energy. So solar and wind is not firmed electricity in the way that, the wind will blow one day and won't the next, and same with solar during the daytime and at night. So you've got this variation in the amount of electricity that's being put through that electrolyzer. And what people are finding is that causes difficulties in how you actually operate those electrolyzers. So there's a number of different issues and factors behind why we are seeing, I guess, a bit of a pullback from some of these large project developments that were touted, within the last 3 or 4 years around green hydrogen using electrolysis. So Sparc Hydrogen, that is really what we're talking about today. Our mission is to develop green hydrogen production technology using photocatalysis or photocatalytic water splitting. So this is an alternative to electrolysis, and it uses completely different infrastructure, and importantly, it doesn't use electricity, as I said before. Our technology and our IP sits in a photocatalytic reactor. So we are developing the infrastructure, it's analogous to the electrolyzer. It's the piece of kit where you produce the hydrogen within this system, whereby you're using photocatalysis to split water. And we feel we've got a leading position in the industry, such that as and when this photocatalysis scales, and I'll talk about that a bit later, we feel like we're very well positioned to take a significant share as it scales as a way to produce green hydrogen.
So when we're talking about scaling, obviously in your industry and what you guys are focusing on, what is the commercialization pathway for Sparc, and what's the timeline there roughly for the shareholders to get a little bit of an insight?
Yeah, so it's a good question, Harry. And one thing I like to reiterate with anyone I speak to about Sparc or Sparc Hydrogen is that we are building value in a technology. It's not just incremental on something that's already out there. It's a step change technology. So we believe it has a really strong play to replace, the incumbent, which is electrolysis or fossil-based hydrogen production. And the market opportunity is really significant. So at the moment, we are developing and scaling our photocatalytic water splitting reactors. And we have a pilot plant under development, which I'll come to on a subsequent slide. So that pilot takes us to a certain technology readiness level. And then there's, more commercial demonstrations beyond that. And companies like Yeah, Hayes has been through a similar process with their pyrolysis tech.
Excellent.
So we, remain open to how, the model is for commercialization, but I think it's fair to say for a company like Sparc, we are not going to be, nor do we want to be necessarily building large scale infrastructure to produce green hydrogen.
Yeah.
We feel we're developing value in the IP, in the technology, and then it's for others like a Fortescue or like, a Mitsui or Mitsubishi or whoever else who requires these green molecules to actually develop
Use it.
projects which utilize the technology.
Okay, excellent.
So we'd much prefer, and our vision is for that kind of capital light approach.
Right. Yeah, excellent. Very, very exciting stuff.
Yeah, and look, so the joint venture as we sit here today, as I said, Sparc Technologies is the majority shareholder in Sparc Hydrogen. Fortescue hold 20%, and the University of Adelaide are free carried for the next 18 to 24 months with a 28% shareholding. So this was all laid out when the JV was structured at the beginning of 2022. And as at mid-2026, that free carry for the university will roll off, and it'll be up to the commercial shareholders, being Sparc and Fortescue, to fund the project going forward. And ultimately, the university will likely dilute or convert into a royalty or something of that nature. So we're currently at the back end of the first stage of the JV, and with the next tranche of funding looking to come in within the next 3 months or so, Fortescue will actually increase their shareholding alongside Sparc. So we'll both sit as equal shareholders at 36%, and we're expecting that to occur, as I said, within the next 3 months or so.
Right.
So the approach we're taking to photocatalysis, and I mentioned it earlier, is that we're utilizing concentrated solar. So this is basically magnification or concentration of sunlight onto these photocatalyst materials. In this video, which you can hopefully see on screen, there's nothing special about this reactor setup. It's just a photocatalyst material in a beaker of water. But what's happening here is we're increasing the magnification onto this material of sunlight, and you're seeing increasing bubbling. So that's hydrogen and oxygen coming off that material. Utilizing concentrated solar and integrating it with photocatalysis has a number of key benefits. And this is where we think our approach is, truly unique and truly has value to accelerate the commercialization of photocatalysis. So firstly, you need far less photocatalyst, which is that white material, for a given amount of hydrogen production. Now, given these photocatalyst materials are highly engineered materials, they're coming out of a number of different research groups and institutions around the world, semiconductor groups, etc. It's a good thing to reduce their usage because, particularly in the early days of the industry, they're not going to be the cheapest materials. So to use less is a good thing from an economic perspective.
Yeah, and we had a question come in from Roger. He was asking what the estimated service life of the photocatalysis module / cell is.
Yep.
And is that one of the key obstacles that you're faced with?
Yeah, and look, this has been to this point, a key sort of barrier for photocatalysis getting, towards commercialization. It goes to the efficiencies and the durability of the photocatalyst materials.
Yeah.
To make the point now, and I'll make it again, we are not developing photocatalyst materials within Sparc Hydrogen. We are sourcing them in. So we are agnostic as to the source of the photocatalyst material. And we think that's a strategic advantage because what we're seeing is new and better photocatalyst materials being developed all the time. So like with any nascent technology, as you get more involvement, more funding going in, you get improved materials, improved technology with that additional funding. And we're certainly seeing that in the photocatalyst space. So being agnostic to the type of material means that we can develop our reactors to be the best reactors to scale the tech from a commercial perspective in terms of producing large volumes of green hydrogen, and we can basically take in or source the best photocatalyst materials that are available on the market. To the point on durability, what we have seen is a significant step change in both durability and efficiency of these materials over the past year or two.
Yeah,
probably a little bit longer than that now.
Excellent.
So we've had these type of materials, which are on screen, operating under sunlight in real world conditions for over a year now.
Right.
The assumptions that we took through a techno-economic analysis was that we would replace the photocatalyst every year. So, you know, they're not forever materials. They don't produce forever, at least at this stage. But if you're able to have a material which is replaced every year because it sort of progressively gets to a point where it makes sense to do so because of its activity, then we think it's certainly commercially viable on that basis. And we are seeing materials with that kind of durability as we sit here today. And secondly, on the efficiencies, we are seeing, huge step changes in the efficiencies of these materials, which basically means the amount of bubbles that would come off for a given amount of sunlight. That's
Right.
the simplest explanation. So there's been a huge amount of work done, various institutions around the world. The theoretical limit, just to give you a range of what we're looking at here, for the efficiency of photocatalyst materials is about 30%. To
Right.
this point in time, the industry's been at the low single digits. What we have seen recently is material, in the 10% range. And that would certainly, in our view with our reactor, be something that was commercializable. So that gives us a lot of confidence in our approach that we focus on scaling our reactor tech, which we don't see anyone else in the world doing. And then these photocatalyst materials are coming alongside us, and we can put the two together into a commercial system.
Yeah, excellent. Hopefully that answered your question, Roger, and we can continue.
Thanks, Harry. And look, just to make the point around why utilizing concentrated solar is also considered important is that it allows us to integrate this technology into already scaled infrastructure. So these mirror fields are already out in the field to produce heat and power for industry. And I'll show you a picture of one of those over the slide. So that allows us to effectively focus on a very small piece of the infrastructure in terms of retrofitting it. And then we can, it's already been scaled in a modular way. So we can just add modules to scale our tech and increase the amount of hydrogen production. And the other key thing, which is more on the technical side of things, is that the heat you generate through concentrating sunlight is beneficial for the reaction rates and the efficiencies of these materials, is what we've found. So that means you produce more hydrogen for a given amount of sunlight, basically. In terms of where we're at with actually scaling our tech, as I said, we're moving to pilot, but what we've recently completed is prototype testing at the CSIRO in Newcastle. And this is a mirror field. The mirrors are at the bottom of the picture there, and the ones that are on a tilt are effectively directing sunlight back onto that tower where that illuminated circle is. We had our reactor up there until April of this year in prototype form. And so basically we were producing hydrogen under real world conditions. And it was a really important experiment and demonstration of the tech, not only because, it proved that it could be done in real world conditions, which no one else, as far as we were aware, had done, but also it allowed us to validate the design of our reactor, which we're looking to scale into the pilot plant and beyond. So that pilot plant is now underway. In terms of the feed study that we're conducting, it'll be located at the University of Adelaide's campus north of Adelaide called Roseworthy, which is an agricultural campus. And it basically is laid out as follows. These 4 different modules you can see are effectively modules of a mirror field. And these mirrors are concentrating sunlight onto a central receiver. And that's where we produce the hydrogen and oxygen. So this pilot plant, we're looking to start construction in Q4 and hopefully have it built by late Q1, early Q2 next year, which would be a first of its kind facility globally and will be a real calling card for the photocatalysis industry, we feel, to bring materials over for testing and also for partnerships and the like. It'll really increase the visibility of what we're doing, and it'll be a real step change for the technology, because once we prove it at this scale, as you'll see over the slide, to make a bigger field is basically bolting these mirrors together. So it's not a significant challenge once you're able to demonstrate it in this format. So this is what I'm talking about, and this is the type of mirror field we're looking to utilize. It's called a linear Fresnel field, and this is a plant in Spain which is producing power. I visited this plant a couple of years ago. These rows and what you see going into the page on the left are mirrors. They're about 1 kilometre long, and there's about 16 rows in this field. And those mirrors are effectively directing sunlight back up into that illuminated receiver on the right-hand picture there. So that illuminated longitudinal receiver is basically where all the smarts of our water splitting reactor are. So we will take these mirrors off the shelf effectively and replace that receiver with our photocatalytic water splitting reactor, which is where we combine the photocatalyst material, water, and the sunlight. Gases are produced in that reactor. They're extracted and then separated into hydrogen and oxygen. So really simple and scalable infrastructure, which is a key benefit of the tech. As I mentioned, we've been through now a number of stages of technology development, which started with techno-economic analysis that we did in 2022, and that really set the goalposts for what we think we need for the efficiencies of the technology to make it commercially applicable. We've done our prototype testing now, which was completed the back end of Q1 of this year, and now we're fully into swing of developing the pilot plant, which will be located at Roseworthy. Beyond that, we're looking at more commercial type projects. So, you know, whilst all of these technologies take time, we feel like we've made really good progress in a really efficient manner from a spending perspective. And as I said, I feel like we are really building value in the tech, and you need to look at what some of these technologies generate from a transactional standpoint in the US and elsewhere, to know that, you know, you can really extract some value if you're able to bring it up the technology path. And then why we're doing this, and this sort of tries to wrap together why we think this is a worthwhile project. It really goes to the point that at the moment, there's no real alternative to producing green hydrogen in the conventional manner, which is using vast amounts of renewable electricity, other than what we're doing, we feel. Now, the cost of doing that has a set path, and that path is really set by the cost of renewable energy. That cost is not coming down quickly, and, you know, certainly within the next decade, we don't see it really coming to a point where it would make electrolysis truly commercially viable, and therefore there's a window of opportunity for new tech like being developed by Sparc Hydrogen to come in and establish itself in the market. So we get a lot of interest around what we're doing. We feel like that interest will only continue as we build the pilot in terms of strategic interest, and I'm really excited about where the technology might go from here. So, Harry, that's it on the hydrogen tech, and happy to take any questions related to that.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we had a question coming in from Rodney. He said, obviously going back to that, the photo of the water beaker with the photo catalyst. He says, if you guys are sourcing the photocatalyst material, where is the IP in the photocatalyst reactor?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll flip back to this slide. So the IP, and we have patent filings in 17 jurisdictions, and we're looking at building on that patent portfolio as we speak. The patenting that we've got really covers what goes on in this receiver. So it's in many ways photocatalyst agnostic, and it's designed that way. But incorporating a mirror field like this and concentrated solar with photocatalysis is quite novel in of itself. We don't see a lot of others doing it, and certainly not in this type of format. So, you know, there's a number of reasons why this is differentiated tech, and the smarts that go into that receiver, you know, it can seem simple. It's just a photocatalyst material, water, and you've got the sunlight coming in and you produce the bubbles. But there's a lot of smarts in what actually goes on in that reactor and how it's designed to maximize the efficiency of what goes on in there. So that's where our patent position sits.
Yeah, and can you utilize seawater, or currently does it only require fresh, clean water? Because that's another question that came in from Roger, and then an anonymous question: how, if it's just pure clean water, how pure does it need to be before it turns foul, and how often does it need cleaning or replacing?
Yep, no, another good question. So we're working with deionized water, so it's very pure water in our reactor. Not to say that they're, isn't potential to use lower quality water, but certainly at this stage when we're scaling the tech and working with different catalyst materials, we want to make sure that impurities in water is not a variable which is degrading the system or having negative impacts. So at this point in time, our assumption is that it's pure water, the same as what is fed into an electrolyzer. We understand that water sourcing, particularly in countries like Australia, can be an issue. But at the same time, there's plenty of sources, and areas where plants like this would make sense. And we feel like in order for our tech to scale and de-risk, it's best to use that water source at this point in time.
Yeah, okay, excellent. And I guess when it comes to the business, obviously these sort of things, they take time, it takes a lot of capital, right? What are the plans moving forward, and I guess in the near term as well, when it comes to funding and non-dilutive funding for those large scale expansion plans?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So if I just touch on our pilot plant to start with, the budget for this plant at a pre-feed level, sort of between $2 and $2.5 million. We have a funding milestone commitment with Fortescue, which is of that same amount. So Fortescue are up for $1.5 million or 1.475, and Sparc are up for 1.025. And that will be crystallized in the next few months as the feed gets completed. So that will fund this plant. Alongside that, we have an R&D program, an R&D team of about 7 individuals. We've got a project manager as well, which is all funded through the existing commitments from the partners. So no additional funding beyond that 1 million for Sparc. And we benefit from the R&D rebates that we get back through the vehicle. So for this 2-year program, we're actually looking at about a $5.5 million budget, of which the actual pilot plant is about 2.5. So we're really well positioned from that standpoint. Beyond that, I should also say we've got grant applications in for this pilot stage. Those Applications, could see, up to $3 million is what we've been asking for. Find out about those towards the back end of this year. So, who knows? I don't know whether they'll be successful or not, but certainly that would unlock further funding for the next stage and beyond, and allow it to do more as we stand today.
Yeah, excellent. Is there any more slides that you want to go through and you continue on with, or do you want a few more questions coming through?
Yeah, look, I will touch on our graphene side of our business, and I might skip through it a little bit, but I think it is worthwhile providing an update on where we're at. And as I said, it's our most mature side of our business, which we've been working on for about 5 years now. And look, graphene, for the uninitiated, and I'll assume that here, is a single layer of carbon atoms in a hexagonal lattice. And what that makes is an extremely strong material, highly flexible, superconductive, a number of different powerful properties, which people have been talking about for the last 20 years since it's been discovered, as being able to transform different materials and different industries. What's eventuated in graphene is actually a bit different in that people have tried it in a number of different formats, number of different end uses, and they've really struggled to make it work. So we've taken a slightly different approach from the majority of players in the graphene space, who are effectively producers of their own graphene. They produce graphene and then they test it in a number of different areas and try and commercialize it or get it commercialized with partners in those different industries. We took a different approach. We said we're not going to produce graphene because we don't want to be single sourced. And that's turned out to be a very important decision that the business made, because graphene ain't graphene. It's not a commoditized product at all. There's about 600 different sources according to the Graphene Council, and there's about 18 different variables for any type of graphene. So every type of material, every source of material will be slightly different. And when you're talking about these kind of nanomaterials, small changes can have big impacts. So you really want to develop expertise in characterizing the right and working with the right graphene for the right application to ensure that you'll get the best result in the end product. And that is what Sparc does. And that's shown by the fact that we've tested in our coatings area dozens and dozens of sources of graphene. And we've
Excellent.
only found a handful that actually work.
Right.
Most sort of, well, the biggest sector, biggest problem we're looking to address with our graphene-based additives is corrosion of steel. So we're looking to and have developed a graphene-based additive which goes into protective coatings, which are used on steel infrastructure. And they are used all over the world on infrastructure like jetties, ports, bridges like the Sydney Harbour Bridge, which they're always painting. It's all to avoid, mitigate the impacts of corrosion. So
Yeah.
it's a big industry.
Yeah.
So EcoSparc is the product, been developed over about 5 years now, and a lot of data points. We do a lot of the work, or pretty much all of it in-house. And it is a graphene-based additive which is designed for that end use, which is in marine and protective coatings. Not to be confused with a paint company. We are not a paint company. We're a graphene-based additive company. And we've developed our additive so that it can be easily and readily utilized by the paint industry. So it's a drop-in additive. It goes in at the point of manufacture, just like a pigment would, for example. And it doesn't change anything about how you utilize paint, how you apply it or how you remove it, or any of the safety impacts around dealing with these coatings.
Yep.
For those who are a bit more technical and interested, this is sort of world-leading research, by the way. We were the first, I think, to actually show this point about how graphene's working in these coatings to make them more durable. And it's basically through inhibiting cracking. So these particles, black particles on the right-hand side, are under intense magnification. They are graphene particles. And what you're seeing there is micro cracks in this coating material, in this polymer, that are starting to propagate, and they hit the graphene particle and they stop. So if you stop the micro cracking, you stop them forming bigger cracks and leading to failures of the paint. So that is a key reason why the graphene is working in these particular coatings. It is mitigating the cracking of the coatings, and you get corrosion occurring when cracking starts. Alongside that, once cracking starts, and a lot of the testing we do in-house, which is to the ISO standards, the graphene also acts to limit the spread of the corrosion from that damage point. So there's a dual action there, and that leads to quite a significant benefit in terms of the durability of the paints. And we've got a variety of different results that we have produced, anywhere between sort of 20% up to 70% improvement. Typically, we use 40% as the sort of repeatable numbers.
Yeah, excellent.
Very easy to adopt, as I said. We've got a commercial manufacturing facility for this additive based in Adelaide, and we can dose up to 7 million litres of paint, which is quite a lot in the Australian context, but a drop in the ocean globally. One of the reasons we're able to dose so much paint is that the additive is only added at 2% by volume. So, quite small amounts per litre of paint, which means that we can have a big impact for not a lot of material. Why this is important and why we think that it should and will be adopted by the market is the significant savings, both in terms of cost and carbon emissions, than it can yield for asset owners. So this is a life cycle assessment that we conducted last year. We looked at a variety of different steel infrastructure. This particular piece of infrastructure was a large jetty, a large port, and it had about 58,000 square meters of recoatable steel. And we showed that over the lifetime of that asset, you could save about 34 million Australian dollars just by using a graphene enhanced paint with EcoSparc. So quite significant for literally no change in what the asset owner would be doing. And we're generating those savings through basically fewer maintenance events. So instead of having to recoat the infrastructure every 6 years, you can push that out to 8 or 9 years. That's the premise on which this study was done. In order to build on that, we're now doing field trials, and we've commenced those field trials with both the South Australian Department for Infrastructure and Transport, along with the Golden Grove mine, which is owned by 29Metals in Western Australia. So we've had a batch of paint made by a tier 1 manufacturer. We've incorporated EcoSparc into that manufacturing process, and we've got EcoSparc enhanced paint that we're now using for these trials in real world environments. These trials are important because not only will they prove to the end users and the asset owners that this paint does apply in the same way and it does adhere in the same way and will perform better than the existing coatings they use, but also it really increases the visibility that we have within the industry and trying to get the paint companies to move along with their own work. So that's the key there. Working with the paint companies we have been doing for a number of years, including a number of the global tier 1 paint companies. I think it's fair to say that it's a difficult industry to get into. Once you're into it, though, it can be a bit of a cash machine. And it's because the volumes we're talking about here, and once you're in the industry and you're specified, basically those specifications are global specifications, and your additive material, can be rolled out, very, very sort of quickly from there. So we think it's worth the effort, and we're making progress, which is good, particularly with a couple of the global majors, which is pleasing. So I think that's something to keep an eye out for over the next, hopefully 6 months or so in terms of updates there. We're also working in graphene and graphene-based additives in other applications, so we're not sort of a one-trick pony in that respect. We've got projects in anti-fouling along with composites and, interestingly, bioplastics, which are effectively more sustainable plastics, which are generated from non-fossil fuel feedstocks and are designed for compostability and or recyclability as well. So really, rapidly growing industries, and graphene has a play to strengthen and enhance those materials. So we're quite excited about some of those early stage projects. We haven't said a lot about them to the market yet because we like to try and secure the patent position that we have before doing so. But certainly we're kind of excited about the prospects there. And then while we're able to kind of utilize our expertise in this way is that we've been working with graphene for a number of years now. We've got world-leading coatings experts within the business and polymer experts. And basically, we've done a lot of work in anti-corrosion. We're looking to utilize that experience into other now product areas, other industries, which is really quite synergistic with the data and the work that we've already done. So there's a lot of exciting things underway on the graphene side, and it's really complementing some of the work we've got going in Sparc Hydrogen. So a lot to look forward to. And I'll pause there, Harry, for any questions.
Excellent. It all sounds like there's a lot going on behind the scenes. I have a question on my end. I'm probably sure a couple of the shareholders will be interested as well. You've got two parts of the business, obviously the green hydrogen side of things, and then the graphene. Which one is the key focus, and is it more of you want to diversify your portfolio, or is it because if one doesn't go as well as expected, you've got a backup? What is the main focus at this point, and where do you see both of them going in the next year, 2 years?
Yeah, so I guess the first point to make is the portfolio as it sits. Yeah, it's quite separate in different areas that we're working in. It kind of came about naturally through, as I mentioned at the start, our work in coatings led to the opportunity into Sparc Hydrogen. So that's how the portfolio came together, and it's not necessarily natural bedfellows. At this point in time, I think it is worthwhile having the two irons in the fire, as it were, in those different spaces. And ultimately, developing technology has its sort of ups and downs, and it also has peaks and troughs in terms of news flow. So we're able to leverage that across the two different areas, which are really uncorrelated. In terms of what the focus is, look, I can say what I think the market focus is. Certainly, as a business, we focus on both, but I think the market is looking more closely at our hydrogen work and our work with Fortescue, etc. I think the market is also interested in what's going on in graphene, but are waiting for sort of the validation of what we're doing there, either in anti-corrosion or in some of these other areas that we're looking into. So part of my work and job since I've taken over in January is to be to really work up to that point, and try and get that validation. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes there, and certainly we remain very focused on what we're doing in graphene, because we think that beyond what we're doing, there's increasing tailwinds in the graphene industry, and it'd be a real shame to go through all the hard yards we've been through and then not be able to reap the rewards as and when we see graphene really adopted at larger scale. So Yeah, that's how I would characterize it for those in the call.
Excellent. And we had a question come through about the Eco Spark. Um, is that patented or not yet? And I mean, the question is that he's mentioned that most paint manufacturers are clever. So what's your way of getting around that, or making sure you can capture most of that market share moving forward to utilize that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And look, we've looked very closely at patenting what we've done in EcoSpark. Ultimately, the window for patenting a number of parties going back 10 or 15 years when graphene was all the rage had some pretty broad patent claims that were put out to the market, maybe without a lot of data. But what that means is it's prior art. It makes it really difficult to actually insert yourself from a patenting perspective
Yep.
in graphene for anti-corrosion. So that's where we've found ourselves from a patenting perspective. Having said that, the barriers to entry are significant without patenting. And to be honest, you'd need to really think closely about whether you would patent it and really lay out the steps you've taken to develop your additive
Yep.
for others to follow, but then tweak and
Yep.
try and get around you, or maintain it as know-how. And we're in the latter camp. We've developed this product over 5 years, and it's been a lot of hard work in not only finding the right graphene sources that work. As I said, there are hundreds, and there are very few that we've found work in this application. So finding the right graphene sources, but the other big issue that people have had, and a number of paint companies have had that have looked at graphene, is that it naturally wants to reagglomerate. So when you put it in a paint or a liquid, you get these graphene particles coming back together into bigger graphite-like particles. And if that happens, it renders the additive useless. It would actually degrade the paint. So we spent a lot of time solving that. And again, that is retained as know-how in the business. The third leg to that point, and you could argue the toss about, how long this would take for a paint company to do. But the testing and data that we've generated over 5 years now is significant. To do one round of corrosion testing, which is accelerated testing, is a 6-month program. So you need multiple rounds to really prove what you've done. We've done 8. We've done 8 rounds of that testing, which is more than anyone else, we believe, in the market. So we've got more data than anyone else in this space.
Excellent. And I think one last question, a question a lot of shareholders are very, very keen on knowing, or at least hearing your side of things, is when do you think Sparc, anticipate when you'll be able to generate a little bit of income from any of your technologies, or is it anticipated that you will need to raise a little bit of further capital to progress the technologies before the income starts coming in? Because obviously when the income starts flowing in, you might see a little bit of a reaction in that share price, which is what all the shareholders love to see.
Yeah, no, and I certainly appreciate that. Following the market, pre-revenue companies are difficult at the moment, and we're seeing that across the board in terms of the market ratings there.
Yeah.
So in terms of commercializing the technology, there's a variety of different ways we can go about it across our portfolio. One way to go about it, and what we're pursuing on EcoSparc, is to manufacture the product. So we have a commercial manufacturing facility, and then effectively sell that into the market. So what we're waiting for there is the validation from these field trials, dovetailing that with the work that we're doing with the coatings companies, and then hopefully all going well in 2025 would be in a position to make some sales of that particular product. And as I said, once you get into that market, it can be a very good market, repeatable sales and large volumes. So there's a big carrot there at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely.
On the Sparc Hydrogen side, for example, as I said, that is really about building value in the tech, not to forecast how Sparc might go about monetizing it, because we would definitely keep our options open there. But certainly, we're working on longer timeframes there. It's more novel and generational kind of technology that I think will build a lot of value in the IP position that either Sparc could pursue, alongside Fortescue, or could monetize in another way. So different approaches, different strokes, different folks, I guess there.
Yeah.
And the other thing we benefit from a capital point is that we get R&D rebates back in. We're expecting about 1.2 million back in December quarter, which is really important for the business. So we feel like with the 2.7 we had in the bank at June, we're really well capitalized into next year. So no, immediate requirements for capital.
Excellent, Nick. Well, it's been a pleasure. I just want to thank you again for your time. And like I said, you've got a busy schedule. So we do appreciate it here at ShareWise. And everyone, this is recorded. So it will be sent to Nick. I'm sure he'll put it on his social medias, and he'll get the word out there a little bit more. It will be on our YouTube channel and on our website as well. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to ShareWise or Nick. I'm sure he's more than happy to go through a few things. But on behalf of ShareWise, Nick, thank you. And again, we'll have to have a chat soon, and hopefully another webinar down the track.
Thanks a lot, Harry. Thanks, everyone.
No worries. Enjoy. Everyone have a lovely afternoon, and stay tuned for more webinars to come.